Hello and welcome back to Live from Paris. It's time now for business news. And for that, I'm joined by Stephen Carroll. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Lorna.
So we're going to start off in China because, of course, we've been hearing details of the government's plans for the economy as the National Congress gets underway there.
That's right. The economy being one of the main subjects treated by the outgoing Premier Wen Jiabao in his speech. He set a new target in that speech for China's GDP. It's going to be 7.5%. That's the target the Chinese government are aiming for in 2013. As you can see, China's GDP has been falling steadily in recent years, come down from the heights of over 10% in 2010. 2012 was the worst year for them in 13 years. Now, part of what they're going to try to do to keep that economic growth going is the government is going to massively increase its spending. Its budget deficit is going to go up by 50% to some $190 billion. That's the idea, being they're going to spend more to try and grow more.
OK, well, interesting to see whether they achieve those targets. But back here in Europe, Eurozone finance ministers have agreed in principle to a bailout for Cyprus, but they're still working out the finer details of that.
Yeah, that's right. They've pledged to come up with a deal by the end of this month. Cyprus actually looked for a bailout last June, but its former government wasn't able to agree on the details with its international lenders. So the country needs 8 to 10 billion euros to shore up its banks. The total bailout amount is expected to be about 17 billion. But just to give you a point of comparison, it was 78 billion for Portugal and 85 billion for Ireland. So an awful lot less money, but certainly a deal expected there too.
OK, so quite a bit of news for the markets to digest. How are they getting on with that?
Exactly. Trading in Europe has just begun. All of the main markets in the green, as you can see. Investors a little bit cautious ahead of the meeting of the European Central Bank's Governing Council on Thursday. Over in Asia, there was a sharp rebound after trading on Monday, where we saw huge losses in the Chinese markets in particular. Those comments from Wen Jiabao really helping trading today. You can see the Shanghai Composite Index up over 2% there.
OK, well, meanwhile, the world's media are going to be getting their first glimpse of the latest models at the Geneva Motor Show this Tuesday. But the European car market remains in crisis, with sales falling by more than 10% last year in France, Italy and Germany. Even Volkswagen, whose new Golf won the Car of the Year prize in Geneva on Monday, has begun to suffer from the downturn, as Oliver Farry now reports.
The Geneva Motor Show starts against a backdrop of yet another miserable year for Europe's auto industry. Now even Volkswagen, which had previously weathered the worst of the crisis, is beginning to feel the pinch. Recently published figures show it is unlikely to improve on last year's performance in 2013, worse than what analysts predicted. But there was good news for the German constructor at Geneva, with its mass-market Golf winning European Car of the Year. This comes after a fairly dismal month for European car builders, with sales dropping across the board and Italy being particularly badly hit. Italian cars, which dominate the high end of the sports car market, are being forced to look elsewhere for sales.
We are very good in the US because the market is going up. We are stable here in Europe. And there are some markets, you see all the Mediterranean markets, it's bad for us, but it's not bad only for us, but for everybody.
One growth area is ecologically efficient hybrid models, which are now taking their place alongside more traditional cars.
The constructors have realized how important are these kind of vehicles. At the beginning, they were hesitating and were not sure that this vehicle would be for the public. But after 5 years, they have now decided to integrate these models within the normal cars.
Up to 10% of models on display this year are hybrid or use alternative energy. It may not be too long before Europe's auto industry is staking its future on such models.
Now, the head of the World Trade Organization, Pascal Lamy, is due to step down in August of this year. The WTO's main goal is to facilitate and increase global trade, but it's faced delays of more than a decade of trying to make progress on its most recent round of Doha trade talks. They were aimed at opening up more markets to help poorer countries. There are 9 candidates in the running for that post. Herminio Blanco is one of those. He's a former Mexican trade minister, and he's here with us now. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Blanco, on France 24.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Tell me, is the WTO really still relevant? We've seen over the past 10 years more individual deals being done between 2 countries, most recently talks between the US and the EU. Does the WTO still have a part to play?
It is highly relevant. It regulates trade amongst 159 countries, many of them developing countries, some of them the least developed countries. So it's highly relevant. It has worked fairly well. it has established not only these rules, but it has established the way to solve disputes amongst the members. It is indeed the fact that more than a decade has been negotiating an agreement, the so-called Doha Agreement, that has been troubling the organization. That is one of the biggest challenge. This is an agreement that could deliver substantial benefits for least developed countries, and there is a need to solve that negotiation to move on, as you very well said. These agreements, the free trade agreements in the world, and very, very importantly, what was announced between the US and the EU, present a big challenge. Big challenge because those agreements have new rules that are more modern, more adapted to the way business is moving nowadays. In the last 12 years, the way of doing business has changed substantially, and the rules in WTO have not.
And are you worried about that there could be, these sort of deals being done between the EU and the US are going to exclude those poorer countries?
That's indeed the challenge. The challenge is that as countries move, as governments, and very especially the productive sector, the private sectors of these countries move into other negotiations, the question is still the WTO will be relevant? I think especially the agreement between EU and the US is a challenge. But as any challenge, it has a risk and opportunities. The opportunity, the basic opportunity, is that I do believe that many countries in Geneva will sense the agreement, the announced negotiations between the EU and the US as a call for action. Hopefully, this will lead some countries to have more flexible positions, both on the side of the US, EU, but also on the side of the emerging economies.
And you're one of 9 candidates for the job, Mr. Blanco, and the current odds put to the Ghanaian candidate, Alan Kyerematen, in the lead. Do you think being Latin American is perhaps a disadvantage for you here?
I don't think so. I think this selection process should be on the qualities of each one of the candidates. And if I may speak just 3 things about myself. First, I'm from Mexico. Mexico is a country that has been very successful in using trade as a tool to promote prosperity. Mexico is exporting every day $1 billion. So it has this part that is very successful. We have parts of Mexico which are very similar to what is a developed country. We also have parts in Mexico which are still in poverty. So the mix of these 2 realities which I live, I think gives me a position where I can be a bridge between developed and developing countries.
Okay.
Number 2,
Just very briefly, I'm afraid we're almost out of time.
I think I am the most experienced negotiator in the world in the following sense. I was the chief negotiator of NAFTA. I was the minister head of the negotiations between Mexico and the EU. I've been in the last 12 years in the private sector, knowing a different vision of what it takes. So all of that, I think, will make me a very good candidate to lead the organization into these negotiations and to relevancy.
Okay, Herminio Blanco, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on France 24. And
Stephen,
thank you for that look at today's business news as well. The international weather's next, then Stuart Norval will have more headlines, so do stay tuned to France 24.